to our NAPE webinar series. This is the first webinar series that we're doing talking about AI, artificial intelligence. With us, we have Andrew McNeil. So Andrew, I'm going to read Andrew's bio on my other screen over here. Andrew McNeil is a national representative with NUPSI, the National Union of Public and General Employees. Responsible for research into public policy issues such as pensions and taxation. He has worked extensively on privatization, particularly new methods being used to privatize public services. Andrew also represents the National Union on the board for Canadians for Tax Fairness. And prior to working for NUPSI, Andrew worked as an assistant for elected officials at the federal, provincial, and municipal level. So thank you so much, Andrew, for being virtually here for NAPE members. And I'm going to throw it over to you.
Thank you very much. And as the first test, can everyone see the screen?
Put in the chat if you cannot see the screen.
And can you see the notes, which you're not meant to see? Not that there's anything terribly confidential in them.
Can't see the notes. Nope.
Perfect. So thank you very much, Elise, for the invitation. As Elise mentioned, my responsibilities include privatization and tax fairness. And unfortunately, there's a lot more in common with AI and these files than there should be, including a lot of the participants. So I suspect most, if not all of you, are very aware of the types of problems that can occur with privatization. I suspect everyone's aware of what happened with Deloitte and a report that was likely generated by AI with major errors, or sorry, with some errors, and the monitoring of patients with in long-term care using AI. I suspect if I was there in person, I'd see everyone nodding vigorously, so I wouldn't have to provide the detailed explanation. But this is very similar to what's happened. Well, the Deloitte report was very similar to what happened with a report in Australia, but it was also found to have been produced by AI. So what I'm going to do in this presentation, rather than go into the details of the problems, because I think people in Newfoundland and Labrador have a very clear idea, is I'm going to try and provide an overview. The other thing I should let people know, though, is that what we've been hearing from labor-friendly academics looking at AI is that frontline workers often have much better information on the specific problems of AI in workplaces than people who are studying it full-time. So comments on what you're seeing with AI are very welcome. The other point I should make is no one's sure what's going to happen with AI. That we're hearing a lot of predictions about what it's going to do, but the claims about what it's going to do will not necessarily match reality. I just threw this picture in there for anyone who's around in the early 70s. This was supposed to be the future of air travel, but in the end it was far too costly for widespread use, and it's a footnote. And I don't think AI will go the way of the Concorde, so I'm not going to make too many predictions. But many of the claims that are being made about what AI can do are going to end up being wrong. But that said, there's two things we can be sure of about AI. That's the impact on jobs and the lives of members and other working people, and then whether the benefits of AI, whether AI will benefit us or harm us, is going to depend very much on the labor movement's ability to respond to the challenges and opportunities. And that one we really can't lose sight of, because again, we've got a lot of people who are hoping to make money from AI, telling us AI is inevitable, and what it looks like in practice comes down to what is a lot more variable than they would like us to think. And there is the potential for human control. So the exciting question, what is AI? And this is the OECD definition of AI, which is as good as any. There's a few definitions out there, but AI is a machine-based system that for explicit or implicit objectives infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. And different AI systems vary in their levels of autonomy and adaptiveness. So if you look at that definition, you see it covers a lot of technology we're already using. These technologies may not have had the impact of newer AI systems, but they've still meant a lot of changes. For example, for those who use GPS, you probably don't have as many paper maps as you might have at one time. Now, what a lot of people mean when they talk about AI is that be specific generative AI, and generative AI is far more powerful than what we've seen before. It doesn't just recognize patterns like GPS. It actually produces new content based on the patterns it's learned. But the important thing to remember is it's still not thinking. So it's called artificial intelligence, but at the end of the day, systems like ChatGPT, DeepSeek, DALL-E, Copilot, or Gemini are just making predictions based on the amount of data they have. The difference between those and earlier forms of AI is the volume of data. So these systems aren't perfect. Large corporations are trying to, or rather are spending billions of dollars to make these systems better. But what's far from clear is how much AI can be improved, or whether we will reach a point where improving it further just becomes prohibitively expensive. Now, with generative AI, as mentioned, AI can do more with the data that's fed into it. One reason for that is that far more data is being fed into it. So prior to 2020, volume of data sets fed into AI was measured in billions of words. Now the data requirements are being measured in the trillions. And that is creating its own set of issues. What we're seeing is a hunt for data where generative AI needs to not just have huge amounts of data, it needs to have accurate data. It's the old, with any database, whether it's a union membership list or ChatGPT, it's a case of garbage in, garbage out. So if the content is flawed, then it's more likely to make mistakes. And one thing, if one danger with AI systems, in fact, is that they may start using data that they've produced themselves to train them. So in other words, an AI system is training itself with data itself produced, which means that any mistakes are going to be magnified. The other insatiable thing about AI is electricity and water. The amount of the amount of electricity data centers use is huge. Here I've used the stats for data centers in the United States. They currently use more electricity than all of Sweden. And by 2030, it's expected data centers in the US will be using more electricity than either Canada or Germany. If you look at data centers around the world, it's even more dramatic that they're using more electricity. They're expected to be using more electricity than all of India. So more electricity than a country of 1.5 billion people. Data centers also need huge amounts of water for cooling. And again, they're saying 6 times the amount of water as Denmark. So we're already hearing a bit about public services and their impact on climate change. It's a lot more than people might expect. For healthcare, they're saying between 3 and 5%. Well, if they start using AI for services like healthcare, then it means the carbon footprint is going to increase. Now, after saying all that, there are benefits to AI. We're seeing people using AI in our unions. We're seeing members using AI, and there are reasons for that. One example one union was mentioning that they had to find a particular clause in a collective agreement to see which collective agreements had it. This would have once taken a staff person a week to go through all the collective agreements. They were able to use AI and get the information in a very short time. AI can also improve training. It could potentially make dangerous jobs safer, and it can be used for tasks that workers find boring and tedious. So even then, there may be a downside. There are researchers saying that apparently the boring and tedious tasks, while we may not enjoy them, provide us with a mental health break. So same applies to public services. If there are controls on how AI is being used, AI can improve public services. Public health and identifying environmental problems are two examples. The ability of AI to analyze vast amounts of data quickly would help improve the quality of decision making. But what's important is the controls, and the most important control of all is that AI should never be the final decision maker. Whenever a decision is made using AI, when information is produced with AI, there needs to be a human being, or maybe several human beings, reviewing the output. So where we're already seeing AI used in public services, I think people in Newfoundland and Labrador are very aware of healthcare, so I haven't, with Halo and so on, so I haven't bothered providing that example. But we're seeing it in social services to determine things like eligibility for benefits or identifying children at risk. In justice, they're using facial recognition technology, and departments of the environment are using it for modeling the impact of climate change, which may seem a bit ironic given the electricity and water consumption. But the first two examples there, social services and justice, are examples of why AI can't be making the final decisions, why there needs to be human review. AI systems do make mistakes, and if there is, as the Deloitte report showed all too clearly, footnotes in a report aren't necessarily a big deal. Deciding whether a child is going to be taken into care, or whether someone's going to be arrested, or whether someone's going to be denied benefits are. And the other thing I would add is just because the consequences are horrendous doesn't mean there is going to be human oversight. So the risks for AI, and this relates to what I said about human oversight, is that AI will be used to implement austerity policies. We already saw that in the federal budget, where the federal government is planning to cut almost 40,000 positions, and they're expecting to be able to use AI to replace a lot of the workers whose positions are being cut. The jury is very much out on that one. But if AI is used to cut positions, there's the impact of job losses, but quality of public services will also suffer if AI errors aren't corrected. And when staff have been cut, that's not going to happen. And finally, there's the impact on transparency and right to appeal. So one of the problems we're up against there is that politicians trying to use AI to implement austerity policies believe they can save money by eliminating jobs, but AI will be able to provide the same quality of service. I think most of us are aware that's a myth, but when you have a myth that is trying to get a politician to believe that there are consequences to cuts, can be like trying to get children to stop believing in Santa Claus. The difference is Santa Claus is perhaps a bit less harmful, or considerably less harmful. So state the obvious, using AI for austerity hurts both workers and the public. For anyone who has dealt with businesses that use chatbots, the problem with using AI for austerity measures are pretty easy to figure out. AI chatbots have no problems with easy questions, but any complex problem, you're out of luck. There's also how you deal with mistakes that AI will make. Again, when AI is used to make important decisions, they need to be checked. But when people have been laid off and the remaining staff are struggling with to deal with the workload, that's less likely to happen. On transparency, we're already seeing problems. AI systems are being used to make important decisions. This includes public services, but it also includes in the US insurance companies using AI to determine whether medical treatment is covered. And when mistakes are made, it's hard to get problems corrected. If the system is shown not to work properly, it's going to cost the company that produced the system and the government department that's using it a lot of money. And saving money has often come ahead of justice and fairness. It predates AI, but there's a particularly notorious example in Britain with the post office and a system that was flawed. And as a result of the flaws in the system, people were actually charged with fraud. Many were jailed. But in spite of the fact the company and subsequently the post office knew about the problems, they didn't come forward. Even though people were being imprisoned. So what happens when AI systems don't work as planned? There are plenty of examples that was already of computer systems that didn't work as planned, that were supposed to save money, and we didn't see the savings. And in fact, we saw a huge number of problems. The federal government's Phoenix payroll system is a good example. It was introduced to save money, and federal government and payroll staff were laid off as it was being introduced. So the result was, because staff were being laid off as it was being introduced, there were far fewer people to deal with the problems. We've had examples at the provincial level, SAMS in Ontario, which was meant to save money on administering social assistance. And I should add that with AI, there's an additional problem beyond what we've seen in the past. And that's that many of these AI, there's a heavy reliance on the internet. In many rural communities, that's an issue. And with extreme weather events, that's an issue. AI can also lead to privatization by default. And when I say by default, it's a flaw that's built in, which isn't necessarily seen as a bad thing by those responsible. So the focus of government AI policies has been to encourage job creation in the tech sector with no thought as to how AI will affect public services. We've seen something similar with the approach to virtual healthcare and other technologies, where they've promoted those technologies. They've spent public money on them to help to develop an economic or the technology sector in Canada. They've given no thought to how it's going to affect public services. So instead of recognizing that we need publicly delivered, publicly controlled options, that doesn't happen. The only options are private, and in the name of economic development, we're handing contracts to take over public services to private technology companies. An even bigger problem with AI and with other services is that many of the companies selling AI services to governments are US companies or operate in the United States. So if they're US companies, we have money going out of Canada. Even if the companies are Canadian, if they operate in the United States, US legislation plus the practices of the current administration raise questions about who's going to get access to Canadians' data. So if a if a company is selling an AI system and they operate in the States, they may have access to some very sensitive data, but who else is getting access? This, I think, is fairly obvious that AI in working conditions is going to affect the skills that workers need. So even where jobs aren't eliminated, the skills workers need are may well be different. It's also going to affect, the actual conditions on the job, including health and safety. And the final issue is management by algorithm. So because jobs will be changed, for instance, if information from AI, assuming they actually implement AI in a responsible fashion, information and decisions from AI are going to need to be checked. So you're going to need more people than if AI, you're going to hang on to more jobs than if they trust AI to always get the right answer or right decision. But the who gets affected, or sorry, there will still be some impact. So we're seeing this a bit in IT, that the people who are being laid off are often newer and younger people because AI is able to do the work that entry-level workers were doing. The people who are being retained in IT are older, more experienced people, and that's because they're the ones who can spot the problems with what AI produces. This could well happen in other areas, but there's a question that hasn't been answered, which is if workers who are new to a sector have nowhere to get the knowledge and experience to fill the jobs, first, where do they find work? But secondly, what happens when all the older workers decide to retire? The other thing is if there are job losses due to AI, that could undermine working conditions for people who are still in the workplace. That the obvious one is fewer workers trying to do the work, but there's also going to be pressure to accept poorer working conditions, and there could be health and safety impacts. This is beyond the fact that people are overworked. AI is being used to operate equipment. We're seeing things like self-driving vehicles. The problem is, what if they're not properly tested? And self-driving vehicles have not worked out as planned. 10 years ago, we were hearing that all driving jobs were going to be replaced by AI, from trucks to taxis. That has yet to happen. And one reason for that is that AI technology has had problems. There have been collisions and, in some cases, injuries and deaths. But the problem we have now is that with the current US administration, they've actually shut down investigations into crashes involving self-driving cars. And the possibility that raises is imperfect technology is going to be used, and that could be a huge health and safety risk. On management by algorithm, again, we're already seeing the use of technology to monitor workers. With AI systems, that will become a much greater problem. AI is already being used for scheduling, determining staffing levels, work allocation, absence management, performance evaluations, and in some cases, hiring and firing people. And like human supervisors, AI makes mistakes. But one big difference is that when AI makes mistakes, it's a lot harder to get them corrected. And when I mention mistakes, I mean, to be clear here, some of the ways that AI harms workers aren't viewed as mistakes by those implementing the systems. And again, there's also a human rights impact. The data used to train AI systems includes content that reflects any prejudices that exist today or have existed in the past. One aspect of that is the fact some groups are over or underrepresented in the data being used. And that's going to mean flaws in the decisions and informations produced by AI. So one comment that I once heard about someone who was thinking, well, AI can't be that bad, was, oh, well, at least it means that bigoted jerk won't be deciding who gets benefits. And the reality is, in fact, the data used to train AI will include any data supplied by, every bigot out there, as well as all of the rest of us. So in terms of the details of how AI can undermine human rights, there's the obvious problem of information being produced that contains inaccuracies that reflect bigotry or prejudice. But then there's what happens when groups are over or underrepresented, because then it means AI will be less accurate. Facial recognition tools are perhaps the one of the best documented. We know that AI has a lot of problems recognizing people with darker skin. One example in the NUPCI policy paper for the last convention was an Uber driver in the UK who was unjustly fired. So Uber in the UK, I'm not sure about Canada, was forcing drivers to upload selfies when they booked on. The driver was black, and the facial recognition software couldn't recognize him. So instead of investigating the problem, Uber fired him. Fortunately, he was able to get the support to fight his case, including from the App Drivers and Couriers Union, and get his job back. But that took 2 years. It's safe to assume that in workplaces with no union, there are a lot of cases where people can't get the support they need to fight this kind of discrimination. And I would add, as a parent of identical twins, they've found that my kids do not use facial recognition to secure their phones unless each of them wants his brother to be able to see his phone. That there are very clear limitations, yet we're being told facial recognition is safe. Controls and standards for AI systems. So for AI to benefit everyone, we need controls and standards in place to address how AI systems work and how they are used. That includes government regulation and legislation, public control of AI when it's used for public services, and collective agreement language. So I'll deal in a bit more detail with what we need to be demanding of governments. But I should say a couple of things about collective agreement language. Unions are already looking at what collective agreement language would help when they are going into bargaining. NUPCI is part of Public Services International, or PSI, which has done a lot of work to help workers respond to the challenge of AI, including putting together an online library on digitalization. So the federal government, oops, did I miss one? Nope, I put the slides in the wrong order. Sorry about that. So I'll just bounce forward. So in terms of the responsibility of governments, what we need from both federal and provincial governments is to change legislation and regulations dealing with employment standards, labor relations, human rights, and privacy to address potential problems with AI. We also need to ensure that when AI is used for public services, information and decisions that it produces are checked by human beings. We need to ensure that people know when AI is being used in public services and that there is an appeals process. We need public control of and delivery of services using AI. And governments need to be considering the environmental impacts. So in terms of what governments are doing, we're seeing relatively little effort to regulate AI. There's the odd regulation or law, but they're fairly limited in scope. The federal government is looking to reintroduce amendments to federal privacy legislation. There are procurement rules dealing with AI, but they're extremely weak. One of the examples is there's a company called Palantir, which there are a number of issues with. It still makes it onto the list of ethical companies, which if you Google Palantir and human rights abuses may seem a little odd. Then I should add while the federal government is not doing a lot to protect workers and the public from the problems with AI, it is planning to make extensive use of AI in public services. As I mentioned, the last federal government budget that makes it clear the federal government is viewing AI as a way of replacing public employees who are laid off. The one piece of good news from the federal government is the Registry of AI Systems. So the registry went live last Friday. This, by the way, is one of the problems putting together a presentation on AI, is that it can be out of date very quickly. The registry does not appear to be complete, and it doesn't appear that the information that is there, even where an AI system is mentioned, is complete. But it is a start, and very encouragingly, it sets a precedent that we can push provincial governments to follow. The other opening for us is that polling shows most people are nervous about AI. particularly if it's used for services they rely on. If you have a problem or need care, you want to deal with a human being, not a bot. And the risk, as with privatization, however, is that cuts to services may leave people willing to accept AI as an alternative to long waits. So in terms of how we respond to AI, first and foremost, it's knowing where the problems lie. As I mentioned at the beginning, frontline workers have information about how AI works in practice that academics who study AI full-time or policymakers may not have. So one priority is trying to hear from people who are affected. NUPGI had its first AI working group last Thursday, and the information that we received from components was very helpful. In terms of collective agreement language, we're seeing collective agreement language to respond to AI being developed and shared. Sometimes it's public, like the digital library I mentioned that PSI have set up. It's called the Digital Bargaining Hub. Other times, particularly when you're about to head into negotiations and you don't want to tip off the employer, it's happening informally. There's also a need to lobby and pressure governments. That is happening. It is an uphill battle. The labor movement, after a lot of trying, got a meeting with the AI minister. Got some small steps, including a union rep being named to a consultative body, but we've got a long way to go. And the final part of it, and this is why I really appreciate NAPE's efforts here, is giving members the information they need. AI is new for a lot of us. 2 years ago, I had only the vaguest idea of what it was. And so we're going to, the more all of us the better equipped we all are to respond to it, the more effective we're going to be. And so finally, questions are very welcome. Comments are even more welcome. We're trying to get a sense of what's happening out there. So if you have any comments, I'd be delighted to hear them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I knew. I was like, there. I see. There's some questions coming. I'm gonna go first to. I saw Brian Parsons first, so I'm gonna unmute you and put on your. You're unmuted there, Brian, or you should be. The once. All right. Bear with me, Brian. Brian, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, okay, and we can hear you. Go ahead, caller. What's your question?
Okay. My name is Brian Parsons, and I'm Chief Shop Steward with Local 6901. What we're seeing with AI, as you've probably heard in our province, Newfoundland and Labrador, we're generating the biggest project for our medical records, medical healthcare system. We're replacing our Meditech system with Epic, but it's expanded into Core Care Epic because it'll also replace the cancer care system and replace other systems such as the one that the social workers use, CSRS, and just like I said, just a lot of systems are going to be replaced with Epic Core Care. It's a $620 million project for our island of 500,000 people across Newfoundland and Labrador. So $620 million over 10 years, with the first 2 years, because it's going to be implemented in April of 2026. So we're a year and a half into the project now. There's 235 people currently, or it could be up to 265 by now. And at the end of the project, like I said, most of those people are temporary. And at the end of the project, there's going to be probably maybe 80 full-time staff looking after the core care across the province. So one of the biggest groups that are going to be impacted will be our transcriptionists. Across the province, there are probably 80 transcriptionists who do all the medical transcriptions for the doctors across the province, which is probably a little bit more heavy, say, than across the other provinces where maybe their doctors and stuff do it. So right off the bat, come April, or I'm going to represent at least 40 people who are going to be, like I said, going to be displaced, and maybe 80 people across the province. But then if you factor in all the other programs, there could be hundreds of members affected. In our collective agreements, we have change of technology. There is no real provincial legislation because they were drafting legislation, but then it died on the vine when there was a new government elected. I attended the Noopchi convention in June, where the Saskatchewan General Union, their transcriptionist support for radiology brought up the same issues that they're having. Like I said, so I always say the problem's always start west, come east. So they experienced it before us. So I'd just like to thank you for your presentation. It was extremely informative, I must say, and very content oriented for us being, like I said, labor unions, right? So we are fortunate in the fact that we do have, like I said, change of technology, but I'd also like to put out the fact that most of these jobs are 99% women who are working from home. So a big portion of the population is being disproportionately, you know, like I said, there are people, there are usually, they usually work from home. They set their whole lives around this. Like I said, with AI, it's like I said, it's big picture for a lot of people, but for me as a local shop steward who have to represent these people, like I said, it's like I said, I see it firsthand. So, like I said, with your presentation, I don't know how you've seen the effects across other provinces such as Saskatchewan. So I don't know if you can comment on what were some of the solutions going forward from displaced members across, our other unions.
So thank you very much for that, Brian. And your transcriptionists and similar occupations are being affected across the country. You're quite right. We just had a meeting where what someone from Saskatchewan was saying was that they did have some retraining language, which was helpful. So they were able to get retraining for people, but a lot of it does depend on, particularly in a province like Newfoundland and Labrador, what options are available within commuting distance, what training options are available. So I realize it's not a magic bullet, but the folks from SGU were talking about the importance of retraining.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I was talking and I was on mute. So I have another question here, Andrew, which is, does NIPSHI have an internal AI policy?
Not yet. That was another thing we discussed last Thursday at our AI working group. And the AI policies are something we're all going to be adopting sooner or later, I suspect. That's one other prediction I'm very comfortable making. One thing that is already common practice, regardless of whether a policy is in place, is that people are careful about what information they feed onto AI systems. That if you add, this is one warning we got from PSI, which a lot of people with a lot of knowledge of IT have also confirmed, which is that if you enter information into an AI system, the AI system then has that information. So, for instance, when we have internal meetings, if there's any sensitive content, we are not going to feed that onto an AI system because the last thing we want to do is have that regurgitated somewhere. And the general rule is there are very strict rules about any information that can identify people personally in a lot of places, and those that don't have those rules will probably have them soon. And there's also a different standard for the free AI systems versus the ones that are subscription based.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Brian, you had another question.
Yeah, members, like I said, and we're fortunate. We're like I said, we're in unions and we have position protection, and hopefully, like I said, retraining and go on to something else. But something I was reading there, there a few weeks ago was we're all familiar with the concept of universal basic income, but because of AI, I've been reading a lot about uh, high income, universal high income. Like I said, the so if governments and such, make funds available for displaced workers, has there been any discussion on that on a national level here in Canada?
So a resolution did come forward at the last convention. It was referred to the NEB on universal basic income. Um, there's the challenge with that is it's something that has a lot of potential, but it's also where tax fairness becomes very important because if we're going to do universal income in a way, or universal basic income in a way that the labor movement would support, then a lot more revenue is going to be needed. And so it's time for the tech giants to start paying their fair share in taxes. Um, I should also add, there is a version of universal basic income out there that is not that the right quite likes, that people opposed to the labor movement quite like, and that's the one where the only support people get from governments is universal basic income. All social programs, housing, health, etc., all of those get cut, and people get a universal basic income and buy the services they need in the private sector. That's very popular with the right. It leaves people high and dry because invariably the basic income would never be enough to cover the services they need. So our view has always been the universal basic income is to cover costs like rent, like food. It's not there to cover things like healthcare or uh, social services or anything like that.
Thank you, Andrew. I just have one, I guess, question, comment. My brain always just gonna go to like campaigns. How do you make this accessible? How do you make people like understand AI in a way that is, yeah, like accessible? And I feel like AI is for austerity, right? It's like those two are so closely linked. And if you can, draw through lines for members that you're talking to, if you can draw through lines to even when we're talking to employers, it's that AI is largely owned and operated by like large multi-billion dollar tech corporations who benefit from workers not existing, right? The more that we can get rid of the worker, the less they have to pay the worker. And in their ideal world, there wouldn't be any, right? It would just, they could all live on their super yachts and they would have a great time. So I guess what do you think, Andrew, is working or that you've heard across the country, like some pushback that is working against AI or some language that is really working in getting members to understand like the gravity of the situation, but how there is still a role for unions and workers to play in like fighting back against the austerity push of AI.
So I'd focus on the idea of the need to control AI, that like
Mhm.
any technology, um, there are some good sides to it. Just in the same way that we're all using computers now, even though, there was an impact on jobs. Um, there's some positives to AI. So we're not going to be able to say to people, no, you shouldn't use AI. But what you can do is point to the danger of, it not being controlled. So first, I think, and I apologize, it's the idea of, do you want all your television to be produced by a bot when you have a problem with collecting your pension? Do you want to have to be constantly arguing with a chatbot, going nowhere and tearing your hair out, or do you want to speak to a live human being who can solve your problem in about 2 minutes flat? Um, and the list goes on. It's I don't know if in Canada we have the cell phone companies, which are a sterling example of why we need as many human beings as possible and why we don't want to have to use bots. Sadly, they're a negative example, but you can't have it all.
No, definitely. And I think, I especially for our membership and other membership in the union. So it's like we're very rural, we're very spread out. Internet is sometimes not the greatest. And when you're doing, if anybody here or if you know anybody that's ever done an AI claim or EI claim that goes wrong, it is not press one for a solution. It's like you have to talk to a person to like explain why your EI isn't working, explain, why your insurance is, all these different things that go into EI and how much you get to claim. You really do need to talk to a person. And if it's anybody, that does not have the luxury of like being able to speak English clearly and easily, or, having above a high school education, which not everybody has a lot of these things. So it's not accessible to expect people to have all the answers when these systems are really complex to navigate. And so having a person on the other end is what kind of gets you through it. But this current federal government would love nothing more. They've been pretty clear about not having humans on the other end of the line. So maybe that's something too that the labor movement as a whole can work on, even if you're not at the federal level. I mean, we're at the provincial level, but pushing the anti-austerity, anti-privatization is always going to be our thing. So, Andrew, thank you so much for, I would say, coming all this way, but like joining us virtually all this way. We really appreciate it. And again, this is going to be shared with our membership writ large so that folks can see what you had to say. I am going to be able to share, you're going to send me your slide deck and I'll have that available for participants. If they just email me, astewart@nape.ca, I'll get you a copy of those slides as well. Thank you, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much. And if people have any comments to share or questions, if you're comfortable passing them on, I'd love to see them, because it's like an AI system, but with far less malevolent intent. We're needing to collect information to find out what we're up against.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.